It's been 3 months since the accident, and the reality of losing my mom and grandparents still grips me with an unforgiving coldness. I'm left with a vast fortune, an inheritance that feels more like a chain than a gift. Sitting in the living room, the phone call with my dad replays in my mind. His voice, usually so confident, had an edge of desperation this time. "Ava, you need to think about your step-siblings," he had said. I remember my terse reply, "Why should I? They're struggling. After I lost my job, things have been tough. You have enough to share." His words had sparked a fury in me. "Dad, they are not my family. This money is from Mom and Grandpa. They meant it for me, not for your new family." "But Ava, they need this. It could change their lives." His plea made my heart race with anger. "So could have your loyalty to our family, Dad. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." He tried to argue, but I cut him off. "No, Dad, I've made up my mind." Hanging up, I felt a mix of triumph and guilt. I knew my decision would deepen the rift between us, but the thought of sharing my inheritance with the children of the woman who tore our family apart was unimaginable. My friends have suggested compromise, giving them a small part to ease their burden. But to me, it's not about the money. It's about principle, about the scars left by betrayal. This inheritance is a reminder of everything I lost. A family torn apart, a childhood marred by divorce and deceit. Sharing it would feel like invalidating all that pain, like saying it was all for nothing. As I sit alone, the house feels emptier than ever. This decision might isolate me further, but it's a stand I need to take, for Mom, for Grandpa, and for the family we once were. I brace myself for the fallout. There will be angry calls, harsh words, maybe even legal threats, but I'm ready. This is more than just money. It's about preserving the last vestiges of a family that once was, and a stand against those who shattered it. The following days were a blur of cold silences and heated conversations. My phone became a battleground, with messages and calls flooding in from Dad and his wife. They were relentless, painting me as the villain in a narrative I refused to accept. One evening, as I was trying to focus on a book, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Dad. With a deep breath, I answered. "Iva, we need to talk about this reasonably." Dad's voice came through, a hint of frustration lacing his words. "There's nothing to discuss, Dad. I've made my decision," I replied, my tone firm. "This isn't just about you, Ava. It's about family, about doing what's right," he countered. "They're not my family." "You made sure of that," I shot back, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. There was a pause, heavy and charged. "I know I made mistakes, but don't let that punish your step-siblings. They've done nothing wrong." I felt a twinge of guilt but pushed it away. "It's not about punishing them. It's about honoring the wishes of Mom and Grandpa. They left this to me, not to them." "Ava, please. Think about it. Just a small portion could—" "No, Dad. I won't be guilted into this. I'm sorry." I hung up before he could reply. The days that followed were a test of my resolve. Dad's wife, whom I never had much of a relationship with, sent me messages pleading for financial help. She painted a grim picture of their life, of struggles and hardships, but her words fell on deaf ears. I couldn't forget how her affair with Dad had shattered our family. My friends were divided on the issue. Some understood my stance, while others suggested I relent to give a small part of the inheritance to ease their burden. "You'll still have more than enough," they reasoned. But every time I thought about relenting, I remembered the cold Christmas dinners, the forced conversations, the way Dad's new family seemed like a replacement for the one he had left behind. No, this was more than just money. It was a stand for what I believed in. As the pressure mounted, I found myself withdrawing, spending more time alone, trying to find peace in the solitude. The mansion, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with the ghosts of a past I couldn't return to. My decision had set me on a path that I knew would lead to more loneliness. But it was a path I had chosen. The rift with my father and his family was deepening, but I was determined to stay true to my convictions, no matter the cost. The weight of my decision began to press down on me as the days turned into weeks. The coldness from my father's side of the family was expected, but the isolation I felt was more profound than I had anticipated. It wasn't just them. Even among my friends, I sensed a shift. Whispers of being too harsh, too unforgiving, started to reach my ears. One afternoon, as I was trying to immerse myself in my studies, my best friend Emily called. Her voice was gentle, but her words carried a weight. "Ava, are you sure about this? I mean, completely sure?" Emily asked. Her question wasn't just casual curiosity. It was laden with concern. I sighed, feeling the familiar surge of frustration. "Yes, I'm sure. Why does everyone keep questioning my decision?" "Because it's a big one, Ava. And it's not just affecting you. It's affecting your relationship with your dad and his family," she said softly. I frowned, feeling the sting of her words. "They were never really family to me, Em. You know what happened. Why is everyone acting like I'm the one who did something wrong?" "It's not about right or wrong, Ava. It's about what this is doing to you. You're isolating yourself, and it's worrying." Her words were like a mirror, reflecting a truth I had been avoiding. The mansion felt more like a prison than a home, a place filled with the memories of a family that no longer existed. The silence was suffocating, and the loneliness was a constant companion. I changed the subject, not wanting to delve deeper into my feelings. But after the call, her words lingered in my mind. Was I letting my resentment and hurt dictate my actions? Was this stand worth the cost of my peace? The following week, my father's wife reached out again. This time, her message was more desperate, almost begging. "Ava, please reconsider. The kids are struggling. They don't have the same opportunities you had." Her words were a painful reminder of the disparity between our lives, but they also ignited a spark of defiance in me. Why should I be responsible for the consequences of their parents' choices? My mom and grandparents had worked hard for this legacy. It wasn't meant to be a remedy for my father's mistakes. As I lay in bed that night, the mansion around me felt larger and colder than ever. The walls seemed to whisper with echoes of the past, of times when happiness wasn't a distant memory. I realized that this inheritance, this vast wealth, had become a barrier, isolating me from the rest of the world. I was standing at a crossroads, torn between my principles and the growing realization that this battle was consuming me. The question haunted me. Was holding on to this legacy worth the cost of my own happiness and peace of mind? The internal struggle between my principles and the growing isolation became a constant companion in the ensuing days. Each morning, as I woke up in the vast, empty mansion, the weight of my decision and its consequences felt heavier. One particularly gloomy afternoon, I decided to visit Mrs. Jenkins, an old family friend and my mother's confidant. Her quaint cottage, filled with the aroma of freshly baked cookies, was a stark contrast to the cold grandeur of my home. Sitting at her kitchen table sipping tea, I opened up about my turmoil. Mrs. Jenkins listened quietly, her wise eyes reflecting understanding and empathy. "Ava, dear," she finally spoke, "holding on to anger and resentment is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." Her words struck a chord in me. Was I holding on to this inheritance out of respect for my family's legacy, or was it becoming a tool for my resentment? "But Mrs. Jenkins, it's about principle. My mom and grandparents wouldn't have wanted their hard-earned legacy to go to them," I argued, though a part of me doubted my own words. She nodded. "Principles are important, but so is compassion and peace of mind. Sometimes we must choose battles worth fighting for, and let go of the ones that only bring us pain." Her words lingered with me as I left. The battle I was fighting, was it truly about honoring my family's legacy, or was it a manifestation of the unresolved anger and hurt from my father's betrayal? That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with a turmoil of emotions. Part of me clung to the idea of legacy and loyalty, while another part yearned for closure and peace. The following days were a period of introspection. I spent hours walking through the gardens, reflecting on my childhood, the happy memories before the divorce, and the painful ones that followed. I remembered my mom's strength, her dignity in the face of betrayal, and her undying love for me. As I sat by the old oak tree where I used to play as a child, a realization dawned on me. This inheritance was not just a sum of wealth. It was a test of my character. Was I going to let it fuel my bitterness? Or was I going to use it to forge a new path, one that would honor the memory of my loved ones in a way that brought peace, not just to me, but perhaps even to those estranged parts of my so-called family? With this new perspective, the decision I had to make began to take a different shape. It was no longer just about money. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be and the legacy I wanted to leave behind. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of my decision and my newfound perspective began to reshape my thoughts. I found myself torn between the desire to uphold my family's legacy and the understanding that clinging to bitterness would only prolong my pain. One evening, while going through old photo albums, I stumbled upon pictures of happier times. Times before the divorce, before everything changed. Seeing my younger self smiling, carefree, surrounded by a loving family, stirred something within me. It was a stark reminder of how much had changed and what I had lost. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Dad. I hesitated but answered, my heart pounding in my chest. "Ava, I know we've had our differences, but I need to talk to you about something important." Dad's voice was somber. I listened, a mix of curiosity and apprehension taking hold. "It's about your step-siblings," he began. "They're really struggling. Your stepbrother, he's been working 2 jobs just to save for college. It's taking a toll on him." His words hit a nerve. Despite my feelings towards them, the thought of anyone having to struggle so hard at such a young age was unsettling. "Dad, I don't know what to say," I replied, my voice faltering. "Ava, I'm not asking you to forgive me or forget what happened, but they are innocent in all of this. A little help could go a long way for them," he urged. After we hung up, his words echoed in my mind. I was conflicted. My initial decision was driven by a sense of loyalty to my mom and grandparents. But now, hearing about my stepbrother's struggles, I couldn't help but feel a pang of empathy. The following day, I decided to seek advice from a trusted mentor, my university professor, Dr. Ellis. He had always provided me with wise counsel and a different perspective on things. "Ava, it's commendable that you want to honor your family's legacy," Dr. Ellis said after listening to my story. "But sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory is by spreading kindness and generosity, especially to those who might not expect it from us." His words were a gentle nudge, steering me towards a decision I never thought I'd consider. Was I ready to let go of the past hurts and extend a helping hand to those who were, in a way, a part of my extended family? That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about my mom and grandparents. What would they have done in my place? Would they have held on to the past, or would they have chosen a path of compassion and forgiveness? The decision I was about to make felt like stepping into unknown territory. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about breaking free from the chains of resentment and hurt. It was about choosing a path that could potentially bring healing, not just to me, but also to those whose lives were inadvertently intertwined with mine. The decision to potentially alter the course of my step-siblings' lives weighed heavily on me. However, as I mulled over the conversations with my father, Mrs. Jenkins, and Dr. Ellis, a clarity began to emerge. This was not just about giving away money. It was about breaking a cycle of resentment and animosity that had plagued our families for years. One crisp morning, I made my way to the attorney's office, the custodian of my family's estate. Mr. Thompson, a stern yet kind man in his 60s, greeted me with a knowing look. "Ava, I've been expecting you. Your father has been quite persistent in contacting me about your decision," he said, adjusting his glasses. Sitting across from him, I took a deep breath. "Mr. Thompson, I've decided to set up a trust fund for my step-siblings' education. However, it's important that this is done anonymously. They should not know that the help is coming from me." Mr. Thompson raised his eyebrows, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "That's a very noble decision, Ava. But are you sure? This goes against your earlier stance." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace with my decision. "Yes, I'm sure. This is the right thing to do. It's what my mom and grandparents would have wanted, to help others, but without expecting anything in return." The legal formalities were sorted with precision and discretion. As I left the office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had found a way to honor my family's legacy while also extending an olive branch to a part of my life I had long resented. The news of their sudden financial assistance reached me through a phone call from my dad a few weeks later. He was overjoyed, though clueless about my involvement. His voice, filled with relief and happiness, was something I hadn't heard in a long time. "Ava, you won't believe it. An anonymous donor has set up a trust fund for the kids' education. It's a miracle," he exclaimed. I smiled, a sense of satisfaction filling me. "That's wonderful news, Dad. I'm happy for them," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The decision to help my step-siblings anonymously did more for me than I had anticipated. It allowed me to let go of the bitterness that had clouded my heart and to make peace with a part of my past that I had struggled with. Standing by my decision also meant standing by my values, doing what I felt was right, but on my own terms. It was a testament to the strength and resilience I had inherited from my mother and grandparents. In that moment, I realized that the true legacy they had left me was not just wealth, but the ability to make choices that could bring about positive change, even in the most complex situations. As I moved forward, I found a new sense of purpose and direction. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation and loneliness, began to feel like a home again, filled with possibilities and a future that I was ready to embrace. The months following my decision to help my step-siblings, albeit anonymously, brought a subtle yet profound change in my life. The mansion, which had once echoed with the loneliness of my struggles, started to feel different. It was as if the walls, once witnesses to my family's unraveling, were now basking in the light of a newfound peace. I began to invest more time in my passions and interests. The vast gardens of the estate, which had been meticulously maintained, became my sanctuary. I found solace in tending to the roses my mother loved, feeling closer to her with each bloom that flourished under my care. My focus on academics intensified as well. I enrolled in a master's program, driven by a desire to not just further my education, but to make a meaningful impact in the world. The inheritance, once a burden, now felt like a tool to carve a path that was truly my own. In this newfound tranquility, I also discovered the courage to rebuild bridges. I reached out to my father, initiating conversations that were no longer laced with resentment or bitterness. Our relationship, while still tentative, began to heal. The bitterness that had once defined our interactions gave way to cautious optimism. One brisk autumn day, I invited Dad over for lunch. It was the first time he had been to the mansion since the inheritance was settled. We sat in the dining room, where the air was filled with the aroma of roasted chicken, and the chatter was tentative but genuine. "Ava, I want to apologize for how I handled everything," Dad said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I looked at him, seeing not just the man who had hurt me, but also the father who was trying to make amends. "I understand, Dad. We both made mistakes. Let's just try to move forward, okay?" He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I'm proud of you, Ava. You've grown into an incredible woman. Your mother would have been so proud." Hearing those words, something inside me healed a little more. It wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about understanding and moving on from the past. As winter approached, the mansion became a hub of activity. I started hosting small gatherings, inviting friends and even some distant relatives. The house, once a symbol of my isolation, became a place of warmth and laughter. In those moments, I realized the true essence of the inheritance I had received. It wasn't just the wealth or the estate. It was the resilience, the compassion, and the strength to make difficult decisions. My family's legacy wasn't just in the tangible assets they left behind. It was in the lessons they taught me, the love they gave me, and the courage they instilled in me to forge my own path. As I stood by the window one evening, looking out at the sprawling grounds blanketed in snow, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I had not only preserved my family's legacy, but had also started writing my own story, one of healing, growth, and hope. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face it with a heart that was now open to the endless possibilities that life had to offer.